What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell, and I'm here with a Monday night episode of You Got Boston. I know some of you are joining right after Bobby's preview with the Cavaliers. So we have the NBA Cup tomorrow, very exciting regular season matchup, so feel free to tune into that as well. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Noah. I cover the Celtics with CLNS Media, and I also write about the WNBA and about basketball for SB Nation, so you can check out all my work there. But yeah, I want to talk about a couple things today. I want to talk about Kristaps Porzingis and the big injury update that we received today, as well as just a couple other things. I spent most of my weekend in Maine, except for the fact that I was back in Boston for the Toronto Raptors overtime thriller, and have a lot of observations on some of the Maine guys as well. Watched Baylor Scheierman. I spoke with him. I spoke with the Maine Celtics coach. I love covering the Maine Celtics, probably maybe a little bit too much. So feel free to ask any questions on that as well. But I'll start with Kristaps Porzingis because I think that's what people are most interested in, and then we'll talk through Porzingis. We'll talk through Maine. We can talk Tatum's game winner and just Toronto and just how we're feeling about the team right now. And then any other questions you guys might have, feel free to jump in and ask. So we'll do a usual kind of run through episode. With Porzingis, so this is the first official update that we've gotten on him this year. And, we heard from the beginning of the season that things were going really well. At Media Day, Brad Stevens said that things were almost ahead of schedule. Things were surprisingly well. But there was this kind of cautious optimism. There was this understanding that, Porzingis was, he's recovering from something that's unusual. It's rare. And certainly they were not going to rush him back. And I think that that's still the case. They're definitely not going to rush him back. I don't think there's any intention to, put him in risk in any sense. That being said, it's been really clear over the last few weeks, at least for me, that he is getting really close. In the last You Got Boston episode that we did, I think it was on Thursday. Yeah, we did one. I did one on Thursday. I had just come back from Brooklyn, and I had a really good seat in Brooklyn with the kind of away media. And the seat was of the Celtics bench, and Porzingis was like dying to play. He pretty much had the ball in his hands every time out. He was just full of energy, and he always is, but it stood out. And so we talked about that quite a bit in that episode. And it was all like, nobody told me that Porzingis was about to come back. But it was just a gut feeling, and I don't usually say that, but I had a similar gut feeling before Game 5 of the finals that he was going to come back. Like, he kind of just has this energy about him when he's about to play that is hard to explain, but when you watch him every day and you watch him very often, like, it's pretty apparent. And so the update effectively is that he actually practiced today with the Maine Celtics, and Xavier Tillman also did, and the organization just sent out a press release to us initially. And so they just did their practice in the afternoon, and then they're both been recalled by Boston. So it's not a long-term thing that they're going to be with Maine. But I think the assumption here, and we don't know for certain, but the fact that Tillman came with him makes it very likely that they scrimmaged with the Maine guys, but that they wanted to have, an NBA big, and Xavier Tillman is certainly a versatile defender. He's somebody that can pose a problem, pose a challenge. And so, yeah, that was, so basically the understanding is that Porzingis very likely scrimmaged with the Maine Celtics today, and was guarded by Xavier Tillman. It's possible he was doing other things. He was doing other drills. But the fact that Tillman went with him, and the fact that it's not just Porzingis did a little bit more in practice, but he actually got called up to Maine, is a big deal. And the fact that the team informed us about this as well. We don't get a lot of these injury releases. I think the last time I got an email like this from the team was when they found out that he tore that ligament that I still can't pronounce. And so this is really an opportunity for him to not just recover from this injury, because obviously the injury is the main thing that everybody's concerned about, but he has not been playing basketball for, since June. And so I think there's a concern about just like the rest of his body and making sure that he's strong enough and that he's good to go. And with a guy like him, but really any basketball player, like the adjustment from going from not playing at all to now you're playing in an NBA game, like so much can be thrown out of whack. And so the priority for him is to make sure that he's building up strength. ESPN has reported this, Shams Charania has reported this, that really the priority is ensuring that everything else is in sync, that his legs and, he's not going to come back in, play a few games, and then tear something else or strain something because he didn't ramp up accordingly. And so it's not completely unusual to use the G League affiliate to have a guy kind of work his way back into shape. It happens all the time in the NBA. But this is a very unique situation because I do think that the Maine Celtics and the Boston Celtics are so intrinsically connected. And I can share more about that. As I said, I went to 2 Maine Celtics games this weekend and talked to a bunch of people. It makes a lot of sense that they would bring the team down to the Auerbach Center for practice and have KP play and Tillman play, and kind of have it be all this kind of big community thing, because that's really how the 2 organizations function. And so, yeah, it's effectively they're calling it the next phase in his recovery as he continues to ramp up his workload. That was the exact language that they used. And so there is no official timetable, but I will say I spent Thursday kind of speculating about when he might be back, why I think he's coming back sooner. Granted, there was always the December timeline. So as we're moving through November, like there was just an understanding that he was going to come back, within a few weeks. But seeing him in Brooklyn, I felt really strongly that it was going to be sooner rather than later. And then, yeah, just 3 or 4 days after that, the Celtics have emailed us that he's doing this Maine Celtics practice. And so most likely I would imagine a scrimmage. And so obviously 5-on-5 scrimmage with contact with a guy like Tillman playing against you, like that's a really it's a really good indication that he's very close, honestly. And he has always seemed it. Like he was doing things over the summer on his Instagram story that I was like, okay, this doesn't seem like a guy who's not going to play till January, But I think they've always wanted to take the cautious approach. And yeah, so that's the update. I could also just say that, I think they really miss him and they really need him back in a sense. And I felt like in the playoffs they had enough without him to get through that run, but it's almost like eventually this guy is a cornerstone of your team. Like he's such a key piece. I think that this team really needs him back. And part of the pain troubles that they've faced come from, I think, the fact that his absence is starting to be more felt. Normally what happens with the media is that we'll have Celtics practice. And then after the Celtics practice, we'll hear back from players and we'll go downstairs and we'll open it up and we can see some guys shooting around. And then after that, we will generally speak to 2 players and a coach. And so, yeah, this time it was different. And I didn't know why. They sent us an email saying that we're actually going to hold media availability before practice. And I didn't know what that was about, but I think that a part of that reason was that they wanted to get this out of the way, get us out of the way, and then practice can start, and then KP can practice, and they can bring in the main guys and all that. So I didn't, for some reason, none of these comments are uploaded, so I was like, everyone's really quiet. But now I'm seeing all your guys' comments. So that's the KP update. I'm just circling through here to see if there was anything in particular. Yes, apologies. It's torn medial retinaculum. Yeah, so at the beginning I was trying to say it. Every time we did one of these videos, I would say the tear. And then I decided that I can just say that I can't pronounce it. And that's better, honestly. These are the terms. Thank you, Pete. You guys can read them for yourselves. Hopefully, if there is another injury in anybody's future, it is something really simple, like a strain, but hopefully there are no injuries at all. So yeah, and then the other thing is that this is a good point. The Xavier Tillman piece, like he hasn't been playing either. And I think that it's really hard to go from not playing at all to playing. Like it's remarkable when guys are able to do that. Actually, Drew Peterson, one of the Celtics 2-way players, he wasn't playing in Boston. He was with Boston most of the year. And then this past weekend, he made his debut in the G League. And he had a rough debut. He really struggled. And afterwards, the Maine Celtics head coach, Tyler Lashbrook, basically said, like, it's really hard when you don't play to come back in and play well, even in the G League. And so this is going to be an opportunity for Tillman to get some run as well. So I think it's a win-win. I love it. I love that they shared this with us, especially the Tillman piece, because I think it's just a fun tidbit. And we can ask about it. We can learn more about it, and all of that. So anything else on KP, or else I can start talking about Maine and some other things. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat as well. So, and I am knocking on wood. I never mean to jinx anybody. I know I talk about injuries speculatively quite often, mostly because it's when we're talking about the end of bench players, like it almost like their participation um, depends on injuries occurring. So that's why I'm asking about them. But ultimately, like it's not. I'm not trying to jinx anybody. I think that I'm not jinxing anybody. I'm always knocking on wood. I'm a big not. I'm always like worried about jinxes. So my family, we touch our hair. That was what I learned. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that. So, okay, before I get into my observations on Maine, I'll just run through these questions quickly. I got a bunch of questions about the city uniforms. They're okay, but I'm also like not one of the reporters or people that care about that stuff. So I know a lot of people have really passionate, strong opinions. I barely notice when there are new uniforms, but I did notice the city uniforms. And I think because Tatum had a game winner in it, it's like they're kind of cool now because there was a really cool scene with them. Probably they would have been pretty forgettable. So we'll see. Yeah, and I think people are curious as far as timeline goes. Like December seems like it would be a very realistic time. I originally thought it would be around Christmas time, but I think it's going to be sooner now. So we'll see. Okay, this is a great question by Phil. What do you think the Celtics' issues are? What do you think is giving the Celtics issues with how easily opponents are scoring in the paint? I don't want to be like a mouthpiece for the organization and like just repeat what everybody's saying, but genuinely, I think an individual defense thing more than anything. Like I felt like in the last game, guards were letting people go past them, and then both Luke Cornett and Nemish Queta didn't play with the same force that we've seen both of them play at points. And so schematically, like Joe Mazzulla, the coaching staff, like they are going to allow players to get those easy shots, to get paint looks over threes. Like that's the philosophy. They're not going to waver even if a guy is shooting 14 of 14 from the floor. Like that's kind of Joe's thing, is that he's not going to make an adjustment in game to stray away from his philosophy defensively if he thinks that's still the most analytically sound thing to do. I think with the Raptors game, it went to an extreme because, we saw the paint, I think it was 78 paint points. And that little push floater that Jakob Podol, I always mispronounce his name, that push floater that he hits, like I think Joe kind of considers that to be not really a pain point, and that's why he talked about that post game. He said like that's a harder shot than like a layup, and that's a harder shot than like some other more difficult seeming shots. It just so happens to be like just in the paint. So I get that's fair, but I think that in the main thing is just that guys just weren't playing with the defensive pride necessary, and we've seen down the stretch like the team has been able to get really key stops, and so I do think it's mostly an individual defense thing, and that sounds like a little bit of a cop out. But Kristaps Porzingis can bail people out when people are out of position. He can bail people out just because he is such a towering rim protector. And I think right now they don't have like a band-aid for individual defense things. I think they really missed Drew Holiday in that last game, but obviously he's been playing outside of that game. So there's no one clear path. But I mean, we talked to Sam Hazard and Pritchard about it today, and they said it was really an effort thing and it was an individual thing, like every one guy. And that's usually the answer a lot of times, like with teams that have the defensive personnel that schematically have been sound for years. Like I do think a lot of times you go back and you're like, okay, this guy just got beat off the dribble and that threw everybody else out of whack. Down the stretch, Queta contested a couple of those floater push shots, and a few of them missed. And it's like I think everybody just wants to see those shots to be a little bit more difficult. Not that they're going to be eliminated altogether. So and yeah, it's really good timing because I think everybody's seeing the reproduction stuff. The KP things are kind of aligned. And then there's also this understanding of like, they're not going to rework the entire game plan or the entire defense, considering the fact that KP is going to come back soon. You know what I mean? So it's like, if he wasn't on the horizon, like if he was 3 months away from coming back, maybe they would change what they're giving up, what they're willing to live with. But I think that right now they're having Nimi kind of play in for Porzingis, and even if he's not as effective as Porzingis is as a rim protector, which right now he's not, like the reality is that Porzingis is coming back really soon. And so I think they're operating under that assumption. So question, yeah, this was just back on KP. Like, I don't think he's going to play any G League games. I think it's just going to be this one practice, maybe a couple practices, but I would be very surprised if they got him in a game. Because honestly, like, I think your injury risk is like, I would almost speculate that it's like higher in a G League game because people are a little more reckless. So we'll see. Oh, and then I'll just give a shout out. Yeah, when I was in Portland, we went to Ironclad East, which is like a Mexican food truck. And I know it was one of How About Them Celtics regular listeners, it was their food truck. So Jack and I and Bobby, we went and we tried the food, and there was excellent vegan options. If you're ever in Portland, highly recommend. Just an aside here. Okay, this is a question from Adam Smith about the Mazzulla hug thing. So Mazzulla was asked by Gary Washburn of the Globe last week at practice about whether it has better relationships with other coaches around the league now. And so he had said earlier last year, he said that he basically just doesn't hug. He doesn't, sorry, not hug. He basically doesn't have strong relationships with other coaches. He doesn't want to get close to them. He thinks it's like a psychological tell. He really made that clear. He said that that's not a priority of his. He doesn't want to have like buddy with these other coaches. And he was asked about that again after, now he's been head coach for 2 years. It's his third year now. And he basically said, yeah, it hasn't changed. He still wants to be cordial with everybody, but he's not going to have close relationships with people. And he specifically brought up Charles Lee, who is the now head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, who was obviously the assistant in Boston last year. I was in Charlotte. I saw Charles Lee. He was very nice to all the Boston media members. He has a couple assistants on his staff that are from Boston. And he basically said that Charles breached conduct by going into the Celtics assistant locker room and talked to the coaches and gave him a hug. And I think he was smirking a little bit. He was joking a bit, but I also think he was being kind of serious. Like he said, he told Charles at the beginning of the year, he's not going to talk to him all year. And you hear about players saying, like, I'm not going to talk to my friend during the series, like Tatum and Bam Adebayo have talked about how during the Miami Celtics series, they're not going to talk. They're not going to communicate. That's during one playoff series, though. What we're talking about here is like a whole other extreme. So Joe is basically telling Charles, it's not that we're not going to talk during the weekend that we're here playing you guys or during a playoff series. Like, we're straight up not going to talk with you guys at all, not talk to you at all during this entire year. So I think he was being serious. I think the thing about the hug, he said, he was asked, did you at least enjoy the hug? And he said no. Probably a little bit of a joke, but I think the anecdote about Charles Lee and him is accurate, and it captures the fact that he like the whole shtick of like he's only business and basketball. Like I do think it's genuine. You can love it, you can hate it. I think a lot of people love it right now, but yeah, I do think it's genuine. A couple questions here about Peyton Pritchard's thumb. We talked to him today. He didn't mention it. He seemed to be working out, doing fine. He's questionable with a thumb injury, so I think he'll play tomorrow. He talked about tomorrow and how he was really excited to play, and that it didn't matter to him if it was the NBA Cup or if it was a regular game or if it was 15-0 or 0-15, that he's always excited for these games. So it didn't sound like a guy that was not playing tomorrow. Sometimes they have little things they just put on the injury report. Even if he doesn't play tomorrow, I would not be concerned. It doesn't seem like a long-term thing at all. So I don't think they would have given us up. They would not have given him us to speak with if it was a long-term concern. Drew Holiday, for example, missed his knee thing last week, one game. Mazzulla already said he'll be back tomorrow, so also not a long-term concern. Okay, yeah, greetings from, I love seeing people from all over the country, all over the world, so hello to Greece. And then, yeah, he did look like the best center in the league. And Joe, I think this is about Podol, but Joe also said, like, he's a really good player. Like, I think sometimes we have a different perception of who the coaches scheme against, and he has given the Celtics a handful over the years, but he also scored a career high 35 points. So we'll see. I'm just scrolling through here to see if there's anything else that I'm missing, and then I'm gonna just go into the Maine Celtics stuff and get into that. So, question here about whether any end of bench guys will be moved by the deadline. I haven't heard anything about that, so I don't want to throw out anything unsourced, but I haven't heard anything about potential trades. I will say, like, the one guy that really hasn't played at all is Jaden Springer, and he's he's a little bit more expensive than a zero contract guy. Like, he's in his last year here, so I could see him getting moved if somebody does get moved. He's always working hard on player development stuff, but if there's a plan to get him out, like if there's a plan to open up a spot, I would imagine he would be a top candidate. I don't know what his trade value is right now, and so it's nothing sourced, but that would be my guess. Like, if you tell me right now a player got traded, that he's my first guess. Okay. And then Okay, question about sorry, there's so many messages and I'm trying to read them all to make sure I don't miss any questions, so apologies for the slow pauses. Who do you think on the Celtics would give the Celtics some trouble tomorrow on the Cavs? I think Darius Garland is a great guess. He's been playing phenomenal. But I also have to go with just the front court players. Like right now, as we talked about with Toronto, guys that are not all stars, we're looking like MVP caliber players. So I do think that their all-star level front court of Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, like they're gonna give them some trouble. So it's almost a good thing that the pain stuff has happened before because it's not gonna catch them off guard. Like they very much know this is an issue and this is going to be the Cavs' strength. So I would say like the front court is going to be the biggest issue. But a guy like Darius Garland, like he was really not a big factor in last year's playoff series, but he's playing like a completely different player. So we'll see. Okay. I just wanted to make sure I got through all these. Sorry, I'm really sensitive to not missing any of these comments because I so appreciate all of you for tuning in and asking questions or participating in the chat. So I don't want to like miss anything. So if I did miss your comment and you want it asked, feel free to just put it again in the chat so that I'm not just like reading the old comments. And then also, I'm just going to acknowledge this. This became a joke on the last post-game show. I don't know where it started. I went back to rewatch and it didn't even make any sense to me, but I do not hate Jayson Tatum. I think it came from me critiquing the fact that he didn't have a great game versus Atlanta. But please end the rumors. I've been getting so many comments like this. So if somebody knows where it came from, you can fill me in on the joke because I missed the beginning and then I thought it was going to be explained to me. It was never explained to me. Okay. So I'm going to get into Maine. Feel free to ask any Maine related questions, but I'm just going to chat about what I experienced, what I saw in Portland. And before I do that, I just want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at Game Time. Game Time is literally my only app that I ever use for ticketing. You can go to NBA games, you can go to Celtics games, you can go to concerts, shows. I buy all my friends and family Celtics tickets for their birthdays. It's like pretty much people know if they have a birthday coming up, they're going to get a ticket for me. And I always do it from Game Time. So all you have to do for Game Time is pick an upcoming game. You can look through the seats. You can actually see what the court looks like from the seat that you choose. So that is the best place to witness what the view is going to be. If it's going to be from the sideline, from the baseline, from up high, you can see it all in Game Time. There's all-in pricing, so you can see the upfront cost. There are no surprise fees at checkout. There are seat views, lowest price ticket guarantee. There is full ticket coverage. So if your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. And I can say I've had issues before where I accidentally bought the wrong thing. They've always really helped me. So I'm a huge fan of Game Time. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Okay, let's talk Maine Celtics. And speaking of Game Time, you can get Maine Celtics tickets, super cheap tickets. I saw a lot of Boston Celtics fans that I recognize from Twitter that said hello to me that I don't usually see at TD Garden because honestly, you can go to a Maine Celtics game for $20 and have a really great experience. So I went to the game on Friday. The Celtics got crushed. They lost by 30. They were down by as many as 50 at a point. And then I went to the game on Sunday and they won by 12 against the exact same opponent. So a very classic example of how basketball is just a crazy sport and two teams can face off and have wildly different wildly different results, despite having the exact same opponents. So the games are played at the Portland Expo in downtown Portland. It's kind of like a high school gymnasium. And I over-cover this team. Like I have a story out on Baylor Scheierman that I wrote this morning for Celtics blog. You can check that out. I am a huge fan of his as a person. He was great to talk to. That was the first time we've heard from him since preseason. So it was great to just hear him reflect on what the last few weeks have been like. And I cover a lot of Maine Celtics guys. I had a story on JD Davison earlier this weekend as well. So you can check that out. I guess I can throw that in here as well. But yeah, I mostly cover them because honestly, I think there's just not that many stories on these guys. And so if people want to learn about them, there's not as many places to go. Whereas I know like you're always going to get your game story on Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum and all those, the top shelf guys. So here's the JD Davison piece. So feel free if you want to save or read either of those later and kind of hear more about how either of those guys are doing, you're welcome to. But my thoughts on just watching this team is JD Davison is an elite G League player. And that's a caveat on G League because obviously we haven't seen him do this at the NBA level yet. But he's just dominating the game. He's a phenomenal, playmaker. He's been super efficient on offense, and he's really established himself as like a superstar in the G League. And I wrote the article, this Maine Celtics article. It was called "J.D. Davison is already a Maine Celtics legend, but he wants more." And a couple of people clowned me and were kind of like, or clowned him and were like, "Maine Celtics legend, like what a nightmare." And I think that I understand what people are saying when they say that. Like, nobody's goal is to be a G League legend, like end goal. But I actually would dispute that because if you go up to Portland, and some of you have been there and some of you have met there, I think you would attest to this. And there's a really special atmosphere in Portland. There's a die-hard fan base that shows up for these games and packs the arena. And they were literally down by 40, and this fan base was more engaged than a TD Garden would be, and the Celtics were in the same situation. And so there is a sense of like this is his third season there, and he's a very distinct player. He has a very distinct look with his hair. And so people have just fallen in love with him. Like people are talking about him. They're so excited that he's still there. It's really unusual to have a guy come back that many years in a row and play in the G League, because normally you just end up in a different organization. And I think the Celtics really believe in him, and they think that he has a future in the NBA, and they wanted to give him this opportunity and give him this chance. And he really helps them on the G League front because he's such a good playmaker and he's such a good like floor manager that they can see guys like Baylor Scheierman and others actually like get productive reps in. Like if you just get some crazy point guard who's super talented but is going to hog the ball and he's not going to play well, then you're actually hurting like all of your developmental guys. So Davison actually props up like the whole roster, and he helps their developmental program quite a bit. The big question is, can he be an NBA player? I asked Tyler Lashbrook, who is the head coach of the Maine Celtics, who was formerly a player development coach on the Boston Celtics last season, so he understands both sides. And he said I said, what's stopping him right now? Is it just that he's lacking an opportunity? Is it that he has a certain part of his game that he needs to get better at? And he said he's really, really, really close. Like he's just about there. And he didn't detail like what specifically he's falling short on. And I understand that. I can say from my vantage point, like I do think defensively he's undersized, and he's not like a Pritchard level defender. And I think if you're undersized, you need to be elite at guarding the ball, full court, doing the other things. And so, yeah, I think with JD, like he's super close. And obviously he's not going to tell me, he's far away from being an NBA player because this is his third and final two-way. He's not going to be able to be a two-way again. That's the rules. But I can just say that if you watch this guy, he became the franchise's all-time scoring leader on Friday night. He was already the all-time assists leader. There's a lot that he's accomplished with this organization, and it is pretty cool that he's been with the same G League team for his entire career, and that he's established this kind of like legend status in this town. And I know people make fun of it because it's the G League and it's not the Boston club, but I promise you that if you're there, you will feel the energy that people have around this guy, and you'd understand why it was not a backhanded compliment. It wasn't an insult to call him that. But at the same time, he is trying to be an NBA player. And he said that. He said this year, he outright told us the goal is to be an NBA player. It's to get a standard deal. He can't be on a two-way next year, so it's like kind of crunch time for him. The other thing that I'll add is that JD is an enormously like loved person from everybody that I've spoken to. Last year, Blaine Miller, who was his coach, always said like the guys love playing with him. He's such a kind person. He's so intelligent, like all these things. And so I think that he's a really good locker room guy. And he's really smart. He has a really high basketball IQ. So can you make the shot consistent? Because he's not a Peyton Pritchard level shooter. And can you become a little bit of a better defender? I think those are the two things for him, because as a playmaker, he's there. He's an NBA level playmaker. He's a great athlete. He had some moments in this game yesterday where he got up so high that I was like, that's just, it's insane. So in any case, that's the JD update. You can read the full story there. I'll also give a little bit of a Baylor Scheierman update, but feel free. There's a Jaylen Brown question I'm seeing. Feel free to ask the Jaylen Brown question. There is no chat equivalent. Honestly, not to be like, you should be annoying, but if you ask the question like more than once, and I'll definitely see it. So not to encourage everybody to like copy and paste the same thing, but feel free to ask your Jaylen Brown question. Other thing I'll say about Maine while you get that queued up, Maine is just, it's a very unique situation with Boston and Maine that the two organizations are super connected. Like there's really not a difference between the two. And I think something that I would say is, like, you might look at a guy like Baylor Scheierman and say, why is he coming off the bench? he's coming off the bench because he's going to be coming off the bench in Boston. They're running the same plays. They're running the same actions. They're using the same verbiage. So everything in Maine is like, it's a direct like extension of what's happening in Boston. And I think this Kristaps Porzingis thing is a perfect example of that, where Kristaps Porzingis is now practicing with Maine tomorrow, because it's not like some random developmental team. Like it's exactly like an extension of Boston. And Tyler Lashbrook was on the Boston staff last year. He understands the situation. Joe Mazzulla was sitting courtside at the Maine Celtics game alongside all of the assistants. So on their one day off, in a very busy 82 game schedule, they went up to Maine and they watched this game. And Joe Mazzulla was locked into this game. He didn't clap. He wasn't looking to the side. He wasn't chit-chatting. He wasn't on his phone. He was watching this game like he was locked in. And I asked him about it at practice today. And he said, these are really valuable opportunities to show the connection, the synergy. I liked the way they played. There was a lot of effort and intentionality and all those things. So, yeah, I'll just say the reason that I've been covering this team and following it is because you actually see that they're the fruits of the Maine labor actually pay off. Sam Hauser was a guy in Maine. Luke Cornett was a guy in Maine. Jordan Walsh spent all of last season in Maine. Mia Shiketa spent a lot of last season in Maine. So that's 4 rotation players that are in Boston right now that are really impactful, that we talk about all the time, that have their roots playing in the Portland Expo. And so when a guy like Baylor Scheierman is told, like, hey, there's a pathway forward for you, you can be an NBA player, you can be a rotation player on the Celtics, like, it's all coming from the fact that there's already a history of this. Sam Hauser's done it, and he signed a $45 million deal this summer. So it's not one of those things where it's like, oh, like, you play in Maine and like maybe one day you'll get an opportunity. It's like, no, there's actually a really clear blueprint. And it's something that I talked to Tyler Lashbrook about, and he said it's the first thing we tell these guys when they get up here is that this has been done before. We go over all the player success stories, and then we explain to them what they need to do to get there. And Jordan Walsh was last year. Last year, people thought that he was very, very far from playing in the NBA. And it's not like right now he's dominating the NBA, but he's playing real rotation minutes. And so it's one of those things. It's like, it's kind of like when people hire from internal, like if you work at a company and they hire the interns, all the interns know, like, hey, if I do a good job here, they actually have a full job, in this field, and you can actually get hired. And it's one thing to tell your interns, like, oh yeah, you could get a job here, but nobody's ever heard of an intern getting a job. In this case, it's like, oh yeah, last year's standout interns are now full-time workers, full-time workers in this company. So that's the way I view it, as somebody who was never close to making an NBA team, but had internships. Like, I always looked around and was like, okay, this is a legit opportunity. They know it's a legit opportunity. Baylor Scheierman knows he's killing it in Maine. He plays so hard. Sometimes on TV and even sitting high up where I sit in TD Garden, it's hard to tell these little things. But sitting in Maine, I sit in the front row. Like, he was everywhere, all over the glass, diving on loose balls. Like, you gotta love the way he plays. He's also been an elite three-point shooter. He's averaging 24 points a game, shooting 45.6% from the field, from three, 45.6% from three. So he's been one of the best three-point shooters in the G League so far. He's hit 20 three-pointers across 4 games. So he's averaging 5 threes a game. So everything's translating to the G League right now. And that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a learning curve for the NBA, but the shot just didn't fall in Boston in preseason. I don't think it's a reflection of him not being a good shooter. He was hitting some NBA threes with a guy right in his face yesterday. So there's no reason why those shots aren't going to be able to count in Boston. They're going to work. He's going to work. He was asked about the shooting struggles, and he said, I'm not worried about it because ultimately, like, I know that my shot's going to fall. I have taken lots of shots in my life, but he felt that he really improved throughout preseason, despite the fact that he never found his offensive footing. So Baylor Scheierman's story, I put it in the chat as well. You can check that out. They're both on Celtics blog, JD Davison, Baylor Scheierman. I think both of these guys have a ways to go. JD Davison, we talked about it. It's the defense, it's the shot, just more consistency there. But honestly, I think that if there was an opportunity for him to be a backup point guard in Boston, he might surprise some people. Like, and I don't mean extended, but if he had to play like a couple minutes a night, I think that he is ready for it. Just right now, they have 2 Olympic guards, and Peyton Pritchard is playing like a star. Though it's a backcourt with not a lot of opportunities. So he's still in Maine, and he's really running the show there, and he's key to these other guys' development, guys like Baylor, who benefits from the fact that he's playing with an elite point guard and not a guy that puts his head down and shot chucks, And then Baylor, he's just been superb, 31 points in his debut. So it's like from the jump, he had no learning curve in Maine. He was great. And Tyler Lashbrook just really gushed on his development, how complete he's played, how much of a competitor he is. So those 2 guys I've been super impressed with through the first 4 games here of the Maine Celtics season. I'm going to keep going up to Portland when I have the opportunity to. It doesn't always work out because there are a lot of times where Maine overlaps with Boston. Like next week, for example, I'm going to be in DC covering the Celtics Wizards game, and I'm not going to be at the Portland game at home. But I have it on my calendar. All the games that don't overlap, I'll be there and I'll be able to answer questions. If there's things that people ask me, like, oh, can you ask this guy this question? Like, I can literally, I'm happy to do that. I know that's not really conventionally how reporters work, but in my opinion, like, we are here to give you guys the stories and to be able to tell you guys what's going on the ground. So people, there's things people are curious about and it's a sensible question, like, I'm happy to ask. And so don't send me any crazy questions because I won't ask any crazy questions, but I will ask smart questions that make sense. Like, people were curious about Jaylen Brown's shoes and Pritchard wearing them. And so I asked those questions, that was DMs from fans that wanted to know. So always happy to do that. And thank you, Pete. Please like the stream. You can like and subscribe to my channel, You Got Boston. So if you're watching this on CLNS, which I think most of you are based on what I'm able to see right now, if you can just search my name and on YouTube, Noa Dalzell, first thing that'll come up is You Got Boston. Just subscribe. It's just good for me to have all my things on there and just to have all the listeners on that channel as well. So those are the main updates. If there are any other main questions, feel free to ask. I see I'm seeing that there are some questions here. Anton Watson, I didn't mention him. He's their second round draft pick. He has not really asserted himself, but I like the way he's played. He hit some big shots down the stretch yesterday. He's just a solid player. I think he's a guy that doesn't stand out in any way, but not in a bad way either. Like he is solid defensively. He can shoot threes, which is, for a guy his size, I think that it stands out. He looked a lot better on Sunday than on Friday. And when I asked, we asked Tyler about him and he said, he's getting better and better after every game. So again, he's a late second round pick. I would imagine he spends all this entire year in Maine. I would be surprised if he went to Boston at all. But again, in Maine, they're learning the coverages that they execute upon in Boston. So it really helps that he's there. It's not like he's on some random G League team and then they pick him up. Like, there's a huge advantage in being on the Maine G League team. And the crowd is phenomenal. I love it. I love the fact that, I think sometimes ticket prices, when they're cheaper, you have more like normal people, diehard fans, and therefore the crowd is more loyal. And then with, sometimes like playoff games, the NBA Finals games, suddenly you have like a really corporate crowd with like not real fans. That's not always the case. Obviously, real fans also go, but sometimes those guys get diluted. So it was cool to see just a pure diehard crowd. And I saw a lot of people taking photos with Mazzulla. The Larry O'Brien trophy was also there yesterday. So that was cool. Just another perk for people that made the trip. They could take a photo with the trophy. And the coaching staff was all with it. It was really cool. So, and I personally wish the team was called not the Maine Celtics. I wish it was called like the Maine Red Claws, which is what it previously was, just because it's really hard to write about them and constantly say, oh, he's on the Celtics. Oh, the Maine Celtics. I wish I could just determine, he's with the Red Claws tonight or he's with the Celtics. That's like the only reason. I think the continuity is pretty cool that it's all one thing. I can also say every single full-time staff member with the Maine Celtics got a championship ring. I don't think that most G League teams do that, but I saw Evans, who is one of their lead PR person who I work with to set up interviews. He was sporting the ring. It looked so cool. And he said, that all the full-time people got it. So just another like little example of how they are able to just show commitment across the organization. And it really is, it's pretty special. I think that it's just been something that I've so enjoyed covering it. So in any case, yeah, I'm going to put a link to my channel so you can subscribe to that. All of my things will stream here as well. It's more just so that I want people to know that if they miss an episode and they want to catch it, like, the only thing on this channel is just my podcast. So, yep. Okay. That's the link. Thank you all. I see some questions here about the Jayson Tatum travel. So Tatum had an incredible game winner after the overtime. So he missed the one at the end of regulation. Everybody remembers that shot, clanked off the glass. Really awkward shot. He got so open that I think it honestly threw him off. Then in overtime, Tatum takes a shot and nails it. And it was a much more difficult shot. It was very ironic. Jaylen Brown had fallen over, so the play was kind of broken, and he hits it. And we save us from watching double overtime, which was great because it was very late, and I was going to Maine the next day. So I was like, thank you, Tatum, for making our night a little bit earlier. But it was a really special shot. Always just incredible to be in the building, especially at home for a game winner. And yes, the next day, the last 2-minute report came out. It was considered a travel. And it was it would have been a travel. And the last 2 minutes report also said that Jaylen Brown was fouled on that last play. And so, yeah, both of those calls were wrong. I will say I read a lot of the last 2 minute reports and like they literally say every single call is wrong. Sometimes it feels like they will outline, oh, they missed the travel, they missed the foul, they missed this. It's like, okay, there's like 40 mistakes in the last 2 minutes. Like, what are we doing about this? You're just telling everybody that they're wrong. I almost don't even really get why they do it. That being said, yeah, it was a travel. In real time, I definitely didn't know it was a travel, but when upon the rewatch, it was obvious that he changed his pivot foot, and so I get it. Julius Randle hit a game winner last night. Guess what? That was also considered a travel today on the last 2 minute report. If you look at a lot of these superstar shots, a lot of them end up being travels. The NBA has a traveling problem. Whether or not they think it's a problem, they let players get away with travels all the time. So to me, like, it's completely irrelevant that it was on the last 2 minutes report because all of these plays this happens literally all the time. Like so many of these shots throughout the game would be considered travels if they went back and looked at them. They just don't call them in real time. They call like very egregious, kind of awkward travels. It's almost like when the guy realizes they traveled and they almost like have a guilty face is when the refs blow the whistle. So in any case, Julius Randle got one yesterday. I did not see the same buzz around his last 2 minutes. So yeah, I would say that I don't know why they like made the Jayson Tatum one such a big deal. Like I saw every single media account like aggregated it and was like Tatum traveled, and so I don't know. I haven't been online yet because I've been on here, but I don't think I'm going to see the same stuff with the Julius Randle play. But in any case, it's not a huge deal either way. The game winner counts. It's his first game winner in a couple of years at the buzzer, so it was very fun. And why do they have the last 2 minutes report? I have no idea why they have it. I really don't know why they have it. I think it's some sort of accountability thing, but it's really confusing. Yeah. And Brown was fouled. So it's like, I guess that would have been free throws, and therefore I think that would have been free throws. I don't know if they were in the bonus, but in that case, like that's the game winner. So I don't know. I just thought it was cool to see a game winner. And you have to really look, you really have to look closely to pivot foot, which again, if you broke down an NBA game and looked at every single shot that's made, like it would actually be alarming how many travels there are. And so I just think we let them get away with it and it's fine. And it's a part of the game. So I don't know. NBA refs, they always put out these statements about why things are not travels. It's not my expertise. Quick message from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. I never know if we have people from all over the country or if it's mostly Massachusetts folks. Feel free to put in the chat where you are. I'm just kind of curious if everyone's in Boston or not. In any case, Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, a couple questions here about whether we talk to refs. There is a pool report, so if there's like the designated media person requests to speak with the refs, I believe you can always get a pool report in. So usually it plays with like a crazy, like there's like an ejection and multiple texts and something wild happened. Normally then like the refs would be interviewed. I don't conduct that interview. I probably never will unless I write for like the biggest legacy paper in Boston, which is the Globe or one of those. So I don't know exactly like when they determine they do or they don't, but when they do, you get that report out and then the media can use that. So at that game, for example, there was no pool report because there was no big controversy. Nobody was like, that's a travel. Like we needed the refs to get involved, but if there was like a really controversial call at the end where everybody's all pissed off about it, like that's the kind of call that normally we would hear from people. So in this case, I don't think people even realized. Interesting. We got Virginia, we got Hawaii, California, Philadelphia. Very cool. Okay. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I super enjoyed this again. Thanks to you all so much. Very active participants in the chat box today. Lots of viewers, which is fun. I mean, I do these anyways, but sometimes there aren't as many people on. Recently, there's been a lot more. So really appreciate all of you for tuning in. Tomorrow, Celtics play the Cavs at home at 7 o'clock. It's a national TV game. It's going to be, I think, the best game of the regular season so far. Hopefully it's a good game because There's a lot of hype around it, but 15-0 Cavs team playing the defending champions, good as it gets, 2 elite teams. I'll be at TD Garden covering that game. I will also be on the post-game show for CLNS afterwards, so we'll talk about everything that we watched, went down. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to D.C., and on Thursday, I'm going to hopefully be at the White House covering the Celtics meeting the president for the championship celebration. So big week ahead. We'll be in D.C. for the White House visit and then also for the Wizards game on Friday. So follow along. You can follow me on Twitter, on Blue Sky. I'm on there as well. You can follow me on Instagram. I don't really post as much over there, maybe like one thing a day, so not as exciting. But I'll do a show from DC just to kind of share everything that's been on the ground. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Again, subscribe, check out the articles on Celtics blog. Anything else you need, if you want to communicate, feel free to message me on Twitter, whatever else, questions, comments, concerns, and share the channel, share the podcast. I'm trying to get the word out to as many people as possible. Okay, everyone, have a good day. Bye-bye.